Bringing attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Hi everyone, this is Andy Steele. Thanks for listening. Today's interview is with David Long. He was there in Ottawa in the midst of the controversy that a few people kicked up over the Rethink 9/11 ads on the buses there. Well, he's going to be talking about the Battle of Ottawa, and in this interview he also talks a little about what he saw in New York on the day of 9/11 from him being a 9/11 witness. So don't go anywhere. You can hear all about it straight from him in just a few moments. Alright, let's jump into some news first. Apparently the office of the Manhattan District Attorney claims that they have no jurisdiction to prosecute the 9/11 murders. This article was written by AE 9/11 Truth staff. It says, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth has for years sought an impartial investigation under public auspices of the collapse of the Twin Towers and Building Number 7 at the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. Until we were recently advised on the applicable law, we had not petitioned for a grand jury investigation of the 9/11 event. We have been advised by counsel that various current and former officials in the federal government of the United States might have a conflict of interest with regard to initiating or conducting a genuine investigation. Various officials appear to be covering up the truth about the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers, a crime that could be prosecuted under state laws relating to murder, arson, treason, and others. Therefore, we have been advised to petition the key state public prosecutor with jurisdiction over the 9/11 event, requesting a meeting between our counsel, representatives from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and Cyrus Vance, District Attorney in and for New York County, which has jurisdiction over downtown Manhattan and or such members of his office as he should designate. And this article goes on to say that AE 9/11 Truth, its board, through its legal counsel, officially petitioned the DA's office, and it says, we assured Mr. Vance of complete confidentiality of discussions and exclusion of any news media fanfare. We agreed to abide by such reasonable and prudent conditions as Mr. Vance himself should establish for the meeting we proposed. We made a detailed offer of proof and outlined concrete evidence by video presentation. In order to avoid political pressure on his office, we urge that Mr. Vance cooperate in securing appointment of a special prosecutor of eminent standing who would appear before a grand jury to offer evidence of crimes against the state of New York in connection with the 9/11 event. So folks, to make it a long story short, Cyrus Vance's office says they have no jurisdiction over this, that it's strictly a federal matter. Now, I'm no lawyer, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm some expert on law here. AE 9/11 Truth has lawyers working on this, and they would be the ones to properly discuss this. However, I do want to mention why I'm so baffled right now, because I was doing some Googling of Cyrus Vance's name and the word terrorism along with it, and I had this article come up from 2012 about a Muslim guy who supposedly plotted to disguise himself as a Hasidic Jew and bomb New York synagogues and churches. And it says in the article here, it's from UPI, the guilty plea marks the first time a terrorist has been convicted on state terror charges since the New York anti-terror laws were passed shortly after September 11, 2001, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance said in a statement. So, unless I'm wrong here, it appears that under an anti-terrorism law that was passed in New York right after 9/11 happened, that Vance has the power to investigate matters related to terrorism, which of course 9/11 has been blamed on by government and media. Alright, this UPI article is an example of that. Now, maybe it doesn't apply with 9/11 because the law was passed after 9/11 happened. I don't know, and anything I say on this right now would just be speculation. Again, I'm not a lawyer. But maybe I should get some of these lawyers on here to field this question. It just seems strange to me, though, that Vance's office couldn't find a way to investigate 9/11 if it wanted to, even if they had to do it in some creative way if their hands were tied. All right, so we're going to keep updated on this story. It's a very interesting one, and one I know that the lawyers, the counsel at AE 9/11 Truth, are not going to stop pursuing. Also, if you go to ae911truth.org, you'll see that there's a new series of articles up. These ones are authored by one of 9/11 explosive evidence experts speak out, psychological experts featured in that movie, Fran Shore, and it's called "Why Do Good People Become Silent or Worse About 9/11?" And the first essay here starts out talking about cognitive dissonance and basic psychology of the public, and them perceiving the government as a parental figure. We've talked about that several times here on the show with various experts who have come on to discuss this. I always find the psychological aspects of our current situation with the truth of 9/11 here 12 years later very interesting. And it's something that always keeps on coming up in all of these discussions is how fear is one of the main underlying reasons that people reject hearing the scientific information about what really happened to the Twin Towers and Building 7 on 9/11. And Fran talks about it in this article here. And future sections of this series are going to be entitled American Exceptionalism, Governmental Manipulation and the Big Lie, and Those Who Lack Conscience and Empathy. These are going to combine information about history, social psychology, clinical psychology, and brain research. And then the final section of this series will address how we can communicate about 9/11 evidence more effectively and our human need for awareness and healing. So it ends on a positive note because it's proactive. It's about taking action and delivering the message how to better do that. So keep returning to ae911truth.org to keep up with this interesting and helpful series. In other news, on Thanksgiving morning last week, Major General James McConville, he's out there in Afghanistan fighting the war there. He was on Washington Journal to talk about, as C-SPAN states on the website, the current and future roles of the U.S. military in Afghanistan. Now, obviously, the justification that was sold to the American public for going into Afghanistan was to avenge 9/11, as the following caller references. But listen to the general's answer to the caller when he gets the 9/11 question.
Next up, Michael, Spring Hill, Florida, Democrats line. Good morning.
Hi, how are you doing, sir? I have a question for you. Why should soldiers obey any orders in a war based on avenging 9/11 from a government that won't give the full story and won't acknowledge the obvious evidence proving that explosive brought down the Twin Towers and Building 7 on 9/11?
Well, obviously there's people in the United States that may have a different version of what happened during 9/11. I had the opportunity to be watching the television sets when those planes went into those buildings. I also had the opportunity to watch the television sets when that plane went into the Pentagon and attacked some of my friends along with the plane that went into Pennsylvania. I'm somewhat surprised that you think, and you're certainly welcome to your opinion, that's what makes the United States a great country. But, Al-Qaeda said they did it. We saw they did it. And I wouldn't question the fact that they did it. And I think it's our responsibility to hold them responsible for that. And it's our responsibility to make sure that never happens again.
Up next, Steve from Pickneyville.
So he watched 9/11 on television. Hey, so did I. Again, the question was about pre-planted explosives, not about elements of the government being behind it or helping it along. And nobody really expects the general to opine in depth on the issue of controlled demolitions in New York on 9/11. But this question raises the bigger issue for our soldiers, and that's why they should obey the orders of this government when they haven't been given the full story of why they're putting their lives on the line, and while there's still very obvious evidence of a cover-up of what really brought the buildings down. And yes, I know there's a chain of command, and I know people say you do what you're told in the military. I'm aware of all of this, and I guess I just don't care. All right, these rules are created by men. They can be broken by men. And at the same time, physics is a law created by the universe. Men can't break that. Your government would like you to think that they could when it comes to Building 7 and the Twin Towers, but you and I know better. All right, so why should any of us follow this government's orders when they have absolutely no respect for us or our intelligence, and they're happy to just shove an obvious lie down our throats without the slightest hesitation? I think the only reason people are doing so is because they're afraid. All right, they pay their taxes, they follow the mandates, and the people at the top should be aware of this. All right, they may have force, but they've lost the hearts of a good many people, and they're losing more every day. And the government can't maintain a situation like that forever, folks. I mean, they may be able to conquer the world with the military, but they are losing America's soul. And without a soul, a nation has no legs to stand on. And rest assured, it may be the Army's job to win a war. Well, it's our job too. And we are winning more and more all the time. Okay, what we're going to do now is what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all of the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that starting now. And that is 10 seconds.
Canadian David Long was a witness to the 9/11 attack in New York and watched the controlled demolitions of the Twin Towers from the street. In the last episode of 9/11 Freefall, he was on here to talk about the efforts of Canadians to use the citizen petition process to get their own government to call for a new 9/11 investigation within their own ranks. He's back on today to talk about what's been going on over in Ottawa with the Rethink ads. Welcome back, David.
Hey. Glad to be here. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. We're still going strong, still fighting and getting the word out, and thanks to people like you, we are succeeding. So I want people to know about what went on and what I've been calling the Battle of Ottawa and the war for scientific reality and 9/11 truth. Before we do that, in case our audience, members of it, are listening to the show for the first time, they don't know who you are. You were at Ground Zero, and you've been you were at Ground Zero even before it was called Ground Zero. You were there right on the day of the attacks, and you started with the 9/11 truth work and have been going at it for quite a while now. So can you briefly tell us your story? What led you to do what you're doing today, and what did you see over in New York at the Twin Towers when the events happened right in front of your eyes?
Well, I'll go into it a little more, a little further back. I lived in New York for about a year, and I spent the majority of my time down in the south end of Manhattan, and I worked at Merrill Lynch, and I would travel through all of those streets, like around the World Trade Center. I passed Building 7 many, many times. I've been up and down Vesey Street, Fulton. My office was at 222 Broadway. And just across the street is the church that miraculously was not damaged during the attack. And I walked in between the towers all the time. They were amazing, amazing buildings. So I knew the area really well. In fact, when I got my job at Merrill Lynch, I was really, really excited, and I'd asked a friend of mine where I should go, and I just finished this meeting at the World Financial Center. That was one of the buildings that was hit by debris from the World Trade Center. And he said, well, have you been to Windows on the World? I said, no, where is it? He said, look up. So, I took the elevator all the way to the top, and I had lunch there. So, this part of the city was really the center of my whole life. Compared to my place out in Queens, the downtown was much more exciting. Sometimes I would spend almost the whole day downtown. So I knew the area really well. So that, there's a couple of things there. I guess I took the attacks personally, like in a deeper way than just people who saw it on TV. You know, sure, it was terrible for those people around the world, millions who saw it on TV, but this was just like my whole life, just blown up in front of my eyes. So, you know, why am I in the movement? Well, if something like that happened to anybody, then, you know, it's not just, you know, terrifying, it's a life-altering event. So, anyway, coming forward now, on that particular day, for me it was just another day in New York, and I was about to walk between the two towers. I stopped for breakfast, and as I've said many times, if I hadn't, I'd probably be dead. So I saw the tower after it was hit, and the subsequent explosion of the second tower. I could feel the heat from that explosion, and the sounds of many more explosions. And I can tell you, nobody there actually thought that those towers were going to collapse the way they did. Surprise, I think it would probably be the way most people would look at it. So that was the beginning of my experience with the movement, and so that brings us up to how we got to the Rethink 9/11 campaign, and I don't know, where do you want to go from here?
Well, and I just want to find out from our audience, you know, so you, when did you start questioning what you saw? You said that nobody thought those buildings were going to come down, and the last time we spoke to each other, I believe you told me that you saw the molten steel streaming out of the building. So at what point did you start saying, okay, there's something more to this than what we're being told?
Well, it's interesting because I was standing in a crime scene, and it was like things just didn't add up. And a lot of it was after just a few days or a few months looking back. Like 2 weeks before the 9/11 attacks, there was a guy that came into Merrill Lynch, and we all had to do an emergency exit drill from this building that was nearby the towers. And, you know, if 9/11 had never happened, I would probably thought nothing of it. But like I said, I lived there for a whole year. We had a drill one time right before 9/11 on how to exit the building in the case of an emergency, and, you know, never after and never before. So does that seem unusual? Well, from a statistical standpoint, yes. You know, the only time they ever had a drill was right before 9/11. So how would they have known? I mean, it's an obvious question. 3 weeks afterwards, when some of us were finally able to get back down to Merrill Lynch to grab some of our stuff, and you know, at this time, like, I was walking through, you know, all that dust that rolled all over Manhattan? I had it all over my boots. It was all over my stuff. It was all over everything. If only I had picked up some of this stuff and put it in a bag, right? It would have been super easy if Niels Harris had been able to just said, hey, Dave, grab some of this stuff. We're going to need it. But, you know, I didn't realize at the time that I was standing on evidence, right? So it's things like that. But the molten metal, 3 weeks after 9/11, some of us are down at 222 Broadway, and there's a woman there who wants to go to the North Tower, and she's been told that she can't by one of the managers there, who rather aggressively says, no, you can't go over there. They're still putting the fires out. And I was standing next to my buddy Mike, and I said, Mike, what's going on? The fires? I mean, and I said this, what could be burning that they are still putting the fires out after 3 weeks? And that right there, that observation is something that any crime investigator would have, if they'd heard that, they would have said, yeah, what would be burning that it would take firefighters 3 weeks? And I think if you went back and you looked at the amount of water that they were pouring for 3 weeks on that pile, it was, everyone knew there was something under there that was burning. And many people said, what could be burning underground? I mean, everyone knows that when fire is starved of oxygen, what does it do? It goes out, right?
Right.
So any fool could have observed that there was something really weird about what was going on, because the firefighters, there was so much water poured on that pile. It was going on for 3 weeks. So you know, at the time, I just I had my other things that I needed to worry about. My whole life had just been blown up, right? So I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do? But over time, things like that really started to eat away at me. And obviously, you know, during the attack, I saw 3 streams of molten metal coming out of the towers. This was like right after the first tower was hit, and all of us could see that. Hundreds of us could see these molten metal streams coming out. They were like at least 3 stories in length, bright orange, and coming out of the towers. And you know, I immediately had this question: what could be melting steel up there, or melting metal? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense at all. And you know, so a lot of, it's kind of like you know, well, it's a detective story. So we were given pieces of evidence here, right? Molten metal coming out of the buildings. What is that? Fires that takes them 3 weeks to put out. Sounds of multiple explosions. These are all things that you know. If and nobody's ever asked me to give evidence, but if I had, this would have been what I would have told them. A normal police investigator would have taken that evidence and then done what? Gone and taken samples, looked for things. How long would it have taken them to actually find molten metal, and where would that have led them? So, you know, in this time period, this is when the first Iraq invasion was about to start, and the whole world now is heading to war against Iraq. And for myself, I felt a lot like I felt very alone, because the whole world, it seemed, was going to go to war with Iraq, and I'm still standing here back at ground zero going, hey, wait a minute. Folks, there's some problems back here we might want to check out first before we go off and you know, invade another country. So these seeds, you know, they kept growing in my mind, but I really didn't have anybody to talk to. And I mean, you know, once war fever starts, I mean, you really want to be the guy standing up saying, I don't support this, you know. So, you know, like a lot of us, it's hard at the beginning to talk about stuff. So a big turnaround for me came in around 2008 when somebody showed me Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and then I heard about this stuff called thermite and molten metal, and all of a sudden, finally, someone had explained it. And not just like some dude that you're talking to at a restaurant, you know. These people have accredited, you know, they're accredited, you know, they're engineers. They make false statements, they've committed professional fraud, you know, this sort of thing, and they're the ones saying it. So, you know, as a professional, that was the first time I was ready to say, you know what, I agree with these people. I'm prepared to say that. So that's when I guess you could say I started to become, you know, in a pejorative way, what the world calls a truther. But as someone said, I heard say last week, I'd rather be a truther than a liar. So that was the beginning of my my entry into the movement. So I started volunteering, and it grew and to the point where we started 9/11 Justice Canada as an organization to lead 9/11 Truth, to help advocate the issue to the government and assist any other truth groups and help to bring us all together. And we've been very successful. So Canada now, I'd say, is one of the leading countries for 9/11 truth in the world outside the United States. And so that brings us up to today.
Right. Now, our audience is already familiar with the Rethink 9/11 campaign. If you're a first-time listener, it's the global campaign where we had ads on major cities all across this planet. Big one was, of course, in New York City and Times Square, but we had them in London, we had them in Boston, Washington, D.C., and, of course, Ottawa, which is the focus of today's show. So, David, I'm going to let you tell the story. Can you tell our audience about the situation in Ottawa? What happened? What was the controversy all about?
Well, at the very beginning, there were 11 cities on the Rethink 9/11 campaign, and I was talking with the campaign organizers who wanted to do ads in Toronto and Vancouver, and I said, I wanted to remind you that Canada was the capital of Canada, and this is obviously a political event that you're doing, so why would you not go to the political center of the country? And lo and behold, they listened to me. So the other thing that happened is a benefactor in Canada put up the first $10,000 for the ads because he agreed with what I was saying, is that if you do it anywhere in Canada, it should be in Ottawa. So we all agreed that the center point of the political terrain in Canada was Ottawa. There's some other factors as well. Advertising is very cheap in Ottawa compared to Toronto or Vancouver, so the bang for your buck. And I went ahead and I looked up what ads would cost on OC Transpo, and they were quite inexpensive. So compared to the what you were able to get in other cities, we had, for $10,000, we had 300 OC Transpo buses carrying these ads. So the next thing that happened is I woke up one Monday morning, and like most people, my clock radio went off, and News 1310 was talking about these ads, and I thought to myself, "Whoa, what have I done here?" I'm listening closely to hear what people are saying. Are they good or are they bad? But the whole city was buzzing about this. We touched off a firestorm, and every newspaper, every radio show, anybody in their car, or on the buses, but people were hearing about it in their cars as they drove to work. Now, to compare, before this ad campaign, I think myself and the other truth activists here in Ottawa, we handed out about 12,000 DVDs about 9/11 truth over the course of 3 or 4 years. These ads, just on the buses, are seen by something like 100,000 people per day. So something like 8 times the visibility in one day, going on for a whole month. So it was a massive increase in 9/11 visibility here in Ottawa. And the debate was, you could see the groundwork that had been built up over the years because so many people already knew about Tower 7. And the News 1310 poll, which is an unofficial poll, but one I like to point to anyway, 93% of the people on the News 1310 website said that they supported the ad campaign. So the public was very much on our side right from the beginning, and you could tell from all the traffic on the websites. There'd be one person talking about the 19 hijacker theory, and then 20 or 25 other people saying, "Oh, you need to go and look at the evidence, my friend," or other less kind remarks. But it was clear that as far as the debate goes, that was settled. It was now many of us. So, at the beginning of your show, you referred to this as the Battle of Ottawa. I'd say you're right, and routed the enemy on this one. The whole city was just buzzing about 9/11 truth in a really positive way. So the next thing that happened is one person complained about the ads. This guy was a student at Carleton University, and he said that the ads were disrespectful to the victims. Now, obviously, I wasn't killed, but as I told you, my whole life was blown away. So I thought immediately, well, there's one of those people here in Ottawa, and I certainly don't agree with your viewpoint. Now, the city councilor that was responsible for the OC Transpo buses and really, the whole transit system, her name was Diane Dean, and she said publicly that she thought that the ads were just insensitive to the victims, and that she would have a review of the Transit Commission policies that allowed ads like this to be on the public transit system. She immediately got herself into a corner because the Supreme Court of Canada had already ruled that advertising in a public space is protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms as under free speech. There's some caveats in there, like you can't be broadcasting hate, they can't be egregiously offensive to children, but within that very high bar, anything else that would be considered normal communications or whatever, all of that is protected by freedom of speech. That's a Supreme Court ruling. So she didn't really have anywhere to go at that point. And what I did is I reminded the people at the Rethink campaign about that. And so they gave a statement publicly about the Supreme Court ruling and sent that to the, they posted it. So that was our response. So one of the incredible things that happened out of that is it turned into a debate on the importance of free speech in Canada. Now, one of the key things that people have said about the 9/11 Truth Movement is that we need to build partnerships. We need to work with other advocacy groups to get them carrying our message too. Because this is actually important for many, many, many interest groups, not just the 9/11 Truth Group. So when the issue spilled over into the space of free speech, now it became something that the newspapers, all media were interested in writing about, because naturally without free speech you wouldn't have newspapers, you wouldn't have media. So even just the suggestion that the government might impinge on the Charter of Free Speech really got people on our side, even more so. So now you've got two weapons in your arsenal. One is obviously the fact that you're right, and clearly that the collapse of Tower 7 is obviously a controlled demolition. But even if you don't agree with that argument, who would argue against free speech? So the momentum was rapidly building on our side, and there was a huge number of articles written about this. So the big success here is the amount of silence that you see from the media regarding Tower 7. That was completely turned around. News 1310 wrote about it. The Ottawa Citizen wrote about it. They called me for an interview. We mentioned Paul Dewar in the petition. That was written about in the newspaper. The Huffington Post wrote about it. Time Magazine online wrote about it. Global Research wrote about it. The newspapers all the way to the Calgary Herald were writing about it. And Ottawa really became the epicenter of the entire 9/11 Truth movement. Just touching on Paul Dewar, he's still refusing to submit the petition asking the Government of Canada to investigate 9/11. And this whole issue is really, there must be something guiding force here, because Ottawa is also Paul Dewar's riding. So the entire weight of the whole 9/11 Truth movement is looking into one riding in Canada, and that's Paul Dewar's riding. And he's also the one politician that is now holding the petition signed by 1,400 Canadians asking the Government of Canada to investigate the evidence of Tower 7 and the collapse of the World Trade Center building. So all of these forces are coming into line. We're concentrating everything we have in North America. So architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, every truth group in Canada, many of them in the United States, we're all focusing everything that we have, as well as the 9/11 Consensus Panel, and many other individuals are all concentrating everything now onto Ottawa. So we're bringing a huge amount of public pressure now onto a key point, and we're breaking through. So it's a very exciting time, and I actually feel sorry now for people who are not yet on the side of 9/11 truth. And the other, I'll just finish off here, that the big breakthrough is that when that Transit Commission hearing actually occurred, I gave a statement very similar to what I told you about my 9/11 experience. I also gave a statement by Bob McIlvaine, and I just found this out recently. His son Bobby, he also worked at Merrill Lynch, so he was actually one of my co-workers, which was something that I actually didn't know until I spoke with Bob maybe about a month before this hearing as we prepared our statement. So it was with a lot of pride that I was able to deliver Bob's message. He's had a terrible ride with some of the media outlets, and it was an honor, I think. No, it was an honor, clearly, to be able to deliver that message about the death of his son in a public meeting like that. So I don't know what it means. Maybe there was some reason that I wasn't killed during 9/11. Maybe the reason was that I could carry that message for Bob through to the commission hearing. So that was very powerful, and that was many years building up towards that. You could hear a pin drop in the room. There were 17 city councilors there. It was recorded, and then not done yet, folks. Isabel Beenan came and presented a statement by Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth about the Rethink 9/11 campaign. And as we did the statement, we played the video of Tower 7 12 times. I think the video technicians really liked it. So this was up on the Jumbotron inside the main meeting room of City Hall. And everybody watched the collapse of Tower 7 in 6.5 seconds. You've seen the video. They played it 12 times. And it was the most public showing of the 9/11 evidence ever in a meeting with elected officials. The chair nearly moved to expel Isabel from the meeting as she announced this was a political move on our part, that we were going to do more ads in December. But Isabel was allowed to finish. She finished off with a very powerful statement about truth, justice, and a future based on the truth about 9/11. So we very effectively and professionally delivered a clear message publicly to public officials. And the really big breakthrough is that the debate afterwards was about freedom of speech. One of the city councilors was a lawyer who read a lengthy statement citing the famous philosopher John Stuart Mill, who, if you look up, wrote extensively about the struggle for liberty. And he said that the Rethink 9/11 ads were protected, and gave a very well-made statement about the ad campaign, and supported reviewing the ad policies, but along the way referenced our campaign, and he sounded excellent. And the debate afterwards continued. And what this shows is that politicians, these are all elected officials, they have the same concerns as any other politician. They can look at the 9/11 evidence, they can debate it, it can be in public, it can be rational, it can be respectable, there's no name-calling, there's no ad hominem attacks, we're simply looking at facts, we're hearing from an interest group, we follow the rules of debate, we move forward, and everyone moves on. So, as we know, politicians see, or until now anyway, have seen speaking out of anything to do with 9/11 as, quote-unquote, political suicide. But in fact, a number of politicians looked excellent in the public eye. And they know, like all politicians, that when they're speaking, they're running for the next election. Everything they say, everything they do, it's all being watched. So when we brought the issue forward, a lot of politicians, again, they do what they do. They spoke well. They made themselves look good. But they were also talking about 9/11, and they were doing it in an intelligent way that appealed to the public. And as I said at the beginning, 93% of the public were supporting the Rethink 9/11 campaign. So this is probably the first ever public debate by politicians about 9/11. And it was an excellent debate. And I think that we've reached a turning point now where more of these debates can occur in cities anywhere. They could happen at the state or at the provincial level. They could. This is a model for debates that could happen at the federal level. Rational debates, looking at evidence, and making decisions publicly, politically. This is it's a great step. And this emerged as a result of the huge investment that has been made in the Rethink 9/11 campaign. So we've reached a new place now. It's a great breakthrough for the movement into the political arena, and there's going to be more of it. So we are progressing as a movement, and I think that's been one of the struggles recently. Is where do we go from here? Well, we've reached into a new space now. At the meeting, privately afterwards, there was a member of CUPE, which is a local union for educators, who gave us a business card. They were very interested in the fact that another interest group was presenting at the hearing, and they're interested in talking with us more. Now, aligning with trade unions is again something that we should be looking for, and that we saw that starting to happen even at the hearing. So I'm very, very hopeful as a result of what happened. And the video that we put out, something like 1,000 views per day. Now it's tapering off now, but within just a few days, it's approached nearly 4,000 views on YouTube. And this is a long video. It's over 15 minutes. So it's been a very successful campaign here in Ottawa, and that's where we are now.
Right, and the people who opposed the ads, the people who went out and started shooting their mouth off saying that it's insensitive, and I don't even see how just alerting people that there was a third building that fell on 9/11 and that it looks kind of strange equates to being insensitive. But the people who did that are coming out looking bad in this, aren't they? Wasn't there some guy, some city council member or some official person at this meeting who essentially said, this is a waste of time. Why are we talking about this? Why are we focusing on these ads? Because this is not obscene, right?
Well, I remember the statement that you were talking about, and actually, I think that was actually supporting us. What the councillor was saying is that this meeting is about running a good transit system for the people in Ottawa. What he was saying is our job is to make the buses and trains run. Why are we even debating this? There's obviously not a problem here. Let's stop wasting our time.
That's what I meant, yeah. That was in support of us, that they were wasting their time by trying to make an issue out of this, which is clearly not obscene. It's clearly not offensive. It's free speech. You know, why are we talking about this?
Exactly. So that wasn't a negative statement. That was a statement that said, yeah, this shouldn't even be on our agenda. Just let them run the ads. That's what the councillor was saying. So for the people who wanted to raise this as an issue, there's another councillor saying, what are you doing? So that was actually, I would interpret that as a statement where someone looked at our case and said, yeah, obviously you can do this ad. Stop wasting my time. But, you know, more to the point, I think, you know, I was thinking about this one student at Carleton who I would think they're probably feeling fairly sheepish right now for what they said, as well as, you would never hear this, but I imagine Diane Deans is thinking, man, I am never going to ever say anything about 9/11 truth ever again. That really didn't work out well for me. And she's probably thinking, you know, when I saw that video of Tower 7, I can finally understand what they're talking about, and I have to admit they may have a point. I would bet that's probably what she's thinking privately. But, Andy, I want to say something here. We have to be understanding as a movement. We are in the majority now. You will see people from our perspectives, like Noam Chomsky and other people, surprisingly, say things which, if you're a truth activist, you're just looking at that going, man, that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Because at this point, if you haven't heard about Tower 7, if you haven't just accepted the fact that this was controlled demolition, and you're still talking about this ridiculous excuse for an explanation that the U.S. government gave, the thing is, we have to be understanding. There will be people who still have put their foot in their mouth and say negative things about the truth movement because they themselves are learning. And some of these people will be public officials, and we have to let them off the hook. I really believe that. There will be officials who were against 9/11 before, who called us every name in the book, but at some point they're going to want to come out. And when they do, we have to be understanding. We have to say, okay, you know what, that was the past. You were misled just like we were misled. And now you come to see the truth. We're not going to bite. We're going to welcome you to the club. And I don't think that we should ever, as a movement, get on the case or give anybody a hard time for anything they ever said, no matter how bad it was. You know, we have to be able to leave the past in the past. Once somebody starts to see the truth, especially if they're a public official, and if they're going to start talking about the truth movement in a positive way, we have to support them, no matter what happened before, because then they won't be afraid of us. They have to see that coming forward now and talking about this is something that's going to be good for them. It'll be good for their political careers. The truth activists will support them. The movement will support them. Yes, they will get reelected. No, it won't hurt their campaign funds. Life will go on. So we mustn't take a hardline position with people who are coming around to 9/11 truth. We have to welcome them. And in a lot of ways, we have to forgive whatever happened in the past and allow people the opportunity to say, all right, fine, you were right. How do we go forward from here? Obviously, there are people who are criminally responsible for 9/11, and even then, you know, I think that we have to, because a lot of us, you know, we should all be recognizing the rule of law here. Even they are entitled to a lawyer. They are entitled to their day in court. They are entitled to due process. All the things that they're trying to take away from our systems that give us these rights, we can't turn around and lynch them. We have to give them fair trials. They have to be allowed to have a defense, because that's what rule of law is all about. So things are changing, and as we start to take the advantage and take the high ground and move forward as a movement, we also have to be conciliatory towards the people who are on the other side, and we have to be progressive, and you know, we have to be working towards a positive future, and I think that means we have to be, as much as we can, we have to be forgiving and understanding for some of these people who have spoken out against us before. We have to try and be forgiving about that. Otherwise, they'll never want to eventually come over and support us.
Right, I agree with you on that one, and you know, it's a big trauma that happened to the whole world. You know, obviously you're in Canada, but it did affect you. You were there, and there were a lot of people from other countries in New York when the event happened. But you know, folks, it's not about being able to say I was right, nah, boo-boo, later on, okay? It's not about being able to rub it in somebody's face and say, yeah, I was right about that and you were wrong. It's not. There's no satisfying feeling in that. This is not some kind of situation where you're debating about what football team is going to win the Super Bowl that year, all right? This is not something that it's even fun to be right about. I've said it on the show before many times. You know, we don't come out and say it was a controlled demolition of the Twin Towers and Building 7 because it's a fun thing to say and we enjoy making people who want to believe the official story mad at us. All right, it's about getting justice and saying it, even if it is unpopular at certain points. It's not as unpopular now as it was a few years ago. That's thanks to the work of groups like Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. But we can't treat this like a sporting game. All right, you can't treat this like, you know, like you're defeating the other side. And maybe sometimes I use language or analogies kind of like that if I talk about it like a war, but it's really just about getting justice and waking people up. And I would love to see a day where this issue doesn't exist anymore, where a lot of the issues that we face in America and globally don't exist anymore. And am I talking about a world where there's no problems? No, because that doesn't exist. But I think the audience can generally agree they've kind of ramped up over the last decade, and we need to return to a pre-9/11 world, get out of the post-9/11 world and return to the pre-9/11 world where people generally could get along a lot better. And so that's what we should be striving for, not trying to say that, hey, I was right and rubbing it in people's faces, but for getting this behind us so that we don't even have to talk about Building 7 anymore, except maybe on anniversary events and looking back in the past about the controlled demolition of the buildings and how it was exposed. But having it be something in history, and I think that's what you're expressing right now, David.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also remind myself that, this isn't like a world versus the United States kind of thing. I have actually met so many Americans just being part of the truth movement. You're American. I'm Canadian. Richard Gage is American. Wayne Costi is American. There's so many Americans and Canadians. So, in an interesting way, just as we always are, Americans and Canadians were working together again. The truth movement spans both countries. So we have a common opponent too, who is probably also Americans and Canadians and others. So it's not about country versus country. It's about fighting the truth and people coming together around that, regardless of their nationality. And it's obvious now that this day is coming. This debate won't be the last one. And it won't be the last time that you see hearings about 9/11 evidence happening now. And the polls that have come out prove that the majority of people support the campaign, and the majority of people now recognize that the destruction of the World Trade Center was controlled demolition. So we are moving forward, and it's a historic time to be in the truth movement. And for all of us who have been working on this for years and years, the payoff time is coming now, where we're seeing the results of all of this effort. All these little things, the components, like the work of Stephen Jones, the work of David Chandler, showing that it was free fall. I mean, that's the name of your show. Every single DVD or flyer, there must be millions of them that have been handed out. The T-shirts, the websites, all of this weight now is focusing onto the Transit Commission hearings, and there'll be more hearings and debates like that. And it's just this huge force now. People are marching together towards this. And it's like the laws of physics. If you concentrate a huge force on a single point, you can drive that point forward like nothing can stop it. And this is what's going on now with the movement. So what we need to do is continue to focus our energies around specific point objectives that we need to break through on, and follow that all the way through until we reach a 9/11 investigation. Richard Gage said this on an interview I was with him for Global Research, that the objective is to go past the government right now and to go to the people directly and create public pressure. That is the only thing that the government will have to respond to, is public pressure. So our mission is to continue to increase the public pressure and concentrate it onto specific, focused objectives like these Transit Commission hearings and others like that. And that is how we are going to eventually produce an event. And that event will be an investigation of 9/11. That's what's going to happen. We can't tell how or where, but these are the dynamics that are going to produce that event.
You're exactly right, and you talked earlier about people from different countries coming together, and I've said it before on the show about how I feel that people, like yourself from Canada or Tony Rook, are more who's over there in Great Britain. Was fought with the BBC over his television tax and their bogus coverage of defaming 9/11 truth activists. But basically, how people like yourselves, even from other countries, I feel more a kinship with, more. I feel like you're like more like my countrymen than somebody like Barack Obama or George Bush, who allegedly are supposed to be the leaders and representatives of the country. These people are not. They don't represent me. People like you represent me, and it's just, I guess, the irony of the fact that borders are being erased. And some people argue, and I don't get into this stuff on this show, but maybe that's the purpose, is to erase borders and bring the world together under somebody's rule. But the irony is that people are being brought together in fighting the lie and exposing the truth. And so I think that's a good thing. It's like it's free people speaking out, and that it does more than just an artificially drawn border ever could. Now, you guys announced right there on the floor, and you alluded to this earlier, the new ads that are coming out in December. You want to talk about those?
Yeah, they'll start on December 9th, I believe, and we successfully raised the money for ads first in Ottawa, and then in January they'll be on taxi tops in Toronto. So that'll be the next stage of the campaign.
Next, this will be on taxi top, so people will be able to look at that. And right there, you show that it's not going to go away. 9/11 Truth marches on, and people will hear about this. People will know about this, and you are focusing this right there in the capital of Canada on Ottawa. And whoever was responsible for putting those explosives in the buildings cannot be happy about that. The momentum is on our side, and we are winning this fight. David, I want to thank you for coming on 9/11 Free Fall again.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me this forum. Your show is very important to the truth movement and everybody else, and it was a pleasure talking with you today, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again.
Thanks for listening. Remember, you can hear this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download it by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.